Russian TV is rewriting the role of the West. Olga Skabeeva's program on December 11th shows how Russian state television is constructing an alternative picture of Western policy. Washington is presented as a pragmatic arbiter, ready to force Ukraine to capitulate, Europe as a chaotic and hysterical force, and Ukraine as a bargaining chip, devoid of agency. Formally, it's an aggressive talk show, but substantively, it's a rather neat system of political signals for a domestic audience. 1. The opening frame, the fight for the remnants of Ukraine. The very first sentence sets the key frame. Washington and Brussels are entering into an open battle for the remnants of Ukraine. This is an important propaganda ploy. Ukraine is described as an already destroyed, almost finished state. Only the remnants remain, for which external forces are fighting. Authority is shifted from Kyiv to the US and the EU. They are the ones fighting, they are the ones making the decisions, while Ukraine is merely the field and the object of the deal. This delegitimizes the very idea of Ukrainian independence. If the country is merely a remnant, any discussion of its right to choose its own policy is devalued from the start. Politico reports that US-European negotiations on security guarantees for Zelensky are becoming increasingly awkward. Trump confirms the conversation was tough and abrasive. We spoke with the leaders of France, Germany, and Britain. They are good friends of mine. We discussed Ukraine, and we did so in rather harsh terms. We'll see what happens. We want to hear the answers before we continue. You say the discussion was rather harsh, sir. Can you clarify? I think we had some minor disagreements about people, and we'll see how this plays out. The Europeans aren't giving up yet. Today, there's a new meeting of the so-called coalition. What the coalition wants and what it's trying to achieve is practically impossible to understand. On Monday, there's another meeting of the so-called hawks. 12 European leaders will gather in Berlin to discuss Ukraine again. There are a lot of diplomatic meetings going on these days, a coalition of the willing, and so on. 2. Delegitimizing Zelensky through Trump and 82% for peace. The central theme of the segment is the thesis that Donald Trump calls Zelensky an illegitimate leader who is using the war to avoid elections. The Russian broadcast draws several conclusions from this. Zelensky's legitimacy is being questioned not only by Moscow, but also by Washington. This is intended to be particularly convincing to the Russian audience. If even the US acknowledges this, then the Kremlin's position is confirmed. The poll, 82% of Ukrainians are for peace, is used as a universal argument. The formula is simple. If the majority is for peace, but peace doesn't come, the Ukrainian leadership is to blame. What exactly is meant by peace, a ceasefire or capitulation on Russia's terms, is not spelled out. It's important that the 82% figure is presented without critical context. The methodology, question, wording, and who conducted the study are not specified. Relying on the figure creates the illusion of scientific validity, but in reality, it turns into an emotional slogan. The people are for peace, the government is against it. 3. Transforming elections from a democratic category into a tool of pressure. A large section is devoted to the dispute over the Ukrainian elections. Deadlines are fluctuating from 60 to 90 days to 6 months, with arguments being made about security, martial law, and legal restrictions. The Russian narrative is constructed in such a way as to blur the meaning of democratic procedure. The elections are described as an external demand from Washington, not an internal demand from Ukrainian society. Any attempt by Kyiv to explain technical and legal difficulties is presented as prevarication and an attempt to stall for time. an important propaganda move, the parallel with the United States and World War II. America held elections even during the war. This allows Kyiv to be accused not only of authoritarianism, but also of failing to meet the standards of true democracies, including those to which Ukraine itself aspires. 4. The West as divided and exhausted. Meloni, Macron, Starmer. The next layer of the narrative is a demonstration of the West's division. Italy and Giorgia Meloni are portrayed as having defected to Trump and those who support Kyiv's capitulation. This is intended to undermine the notion of a unified European line. Macron and Starmer are quoted selectively. The French president as a wounded rooster with limited influence, the British Prime Minister as a leader who professes support for Ukraine but allegedly lacks the resources. Links to Corriere della Sera, the Wall Street Journal, the Telegraph, and the Financial Times create the impression that even the Western press admits there's no money, military enthusiasm has dried up, and Europe is tired. The message works like this: the West is not only hypocritical and disunited, but also financially burned out, while Russia is winning on the front. Hence the logical conclusion for domestic audiences: sooner or later Kyiv will be forced to make concessions, and the later the worse it will be.